Hey guys, PC Guy here, and it's been a weird year and all, but summer is still coming, as some of you might notice. Now, if you live on a slightly less crappy place in the Netherlands, you might actually get more than 2 hours of summer a year, and some actually decent, warm, sunny days outside. And so that also impacts your PC, whether you believe it or not. So we're going to be talking about cooling a bit today. Now, I have done a couple of videos on this topic in the past, however, considering how YouTube works, those videos are never really going to be shown to anyone, most likely. If I want anyone to actually benefit from it and actually maybe learn a thing or two or make a decision or two, I'm better off making a new video, and I'd like to think that I can expose it a bit better now with some more experience than I did last year or a few months ago. First of all, why does it even matter if your parts are running hot or not? Well, heat is actually the main reason that, or other than breaking off some headers or actually physically breaking something, in terms of things stopping to work, heat is one of the main killers of PC components. There are several reasons for this, but one of the more logical ones is, as you know, when things heat up, they expand, when they cool down, they contract again. And all of that expansion and contraction at the microscopic level is going to have some effect on the delicate circuitry of parts like your CPUs or GPUs or any other PC part. There's also the fact that a lot of PC parts like CPUs and GPUs, like I mentioned, they tend to run faster and more efficiently when they are cold, or well, cooler at least, than when they are blistering hot. So there's also the performance reason that you actually want your stuff to run colder, so you can squeeze out a few more FPS or gigahertz out of your parts. This is mostly going on CPU and GPU. I'm not really going to be focusing on stuff like RAM and hard drives, because those are mostly passively cool, to be quite honest. And yeah, there's always the option of clocking down your CPU or GPU to make them run cooler, but that's kind of not the point. You want them to still go fast, but go fast and be cooler as well. Improving the cooling on your PC does not necessarily involve buying stuff. On some cases, well, some edge cases, let's say, it's just pure bad maintenance. If you clear out the dust from your PC, take off the hair from the air inlets and the fans and the heat sinks and the filters, that might actually help a lot, especially if you have your PC lying on the ground where all the dust gets in there, or if you have a little friendly helper that you see back there, helping to keep your PC nice and hairy. Another important consideration is changing out the thermal paste on your CPU at least every year or so, ideally every twice a year or something, but at least every year or so. GPUs can also get a thermal paste change every a couple of years after some use. And yeah, don't forget about laptops, because those also have thermal paste there, obviously. And yeah, that material helps with transferring the heat from your PC to whatever cooling solution, well, from your CPU or GPU to whatever cooling solution you're using. And obviously, the better it works. If it's old, it's not really going to work that well for several reasons, which I'm not going to get into right now, but it helps to change it now and again. If it gets really bad and you really cannot afford to get better cooling or whatever, or if you have tried all these other steps that I mentioned and they don't work, there's always the quick fix. If you have a desktop PC, you can always take off the side panel for some extra airflow if it gets really bad, and if you've tried the other steps and they don't work, and well, hell, point a fan at it while you're at it, and that probably will get you going, at least for the time being. But yeah, that's far from the ideal solution. Now, if you're looking for more than just the quick, easy fixes that might improve a little bit, then you are actually looking at improving the other factors that actually matter on cooling, which are the case that you have, the cooling solution that you have. This means what type of cooling, air cooling, water cooling, and how many fans and all that stuff. And to a lesser extent, because it does matter, but not as much as the other two factors, cable management. Now, the cable management does not matter as much as the other two, although it still does. You might have a very good case and a very good cooling solution. However, if the case ventilates well and has enough fans and all that, but the air coming in is all getting blocked and turbulent and all that sort of stuff by all sorts of cables in the way, and just the air just can't get through, at least not very easily, then it might be underperforming in the temperature department because of that, so it does help to keep the tables tidy and as much out of the way as possible. So yeah, not only does it look better, it will also actually help with the performance a little bit. The case matters more than you think. Not only the kind of whatever arrangement there is of where what goes where, if there's hard drive bays in the way and all that sort of stuff. That all matters because it also influences what kind of cooling solution you can have. Where do you even have space for the fans? Not only that, but there's been a trend in the past few years of case manufacturers to have these big glass boxes that have no holes for air to even come through, or fans that are too close to the glass at the front, and whatever holes are on the side, they're behind the fan, so the fan's not really pulling air in, at least not much. And that all really requires some consideration. Might sound a bit hypocritical considering I have a Lee and Lee ROG PC11 Dynamic, which is basically a glass box, but has an indent on the side and plenty of airflow, so that's kind of the good exception to the rule. Other things like PSU shrouds also block any sort of possible air intake from the bottom. Some have air intake at the bottom, but they're too close to the desk, so nothing really comes through there. There's plenty of bad examples out there, but in general, the more and bigger fans you can support, the better. This is a very general statement, and if you can go with mesh in terms of the front, it's better than glass because it will allow air through. And yeah, try to keep it at more intake than exhaust to keep the dust out under control. Instead of it going into the case, it will be blowing out of the case because there's more air trying to come in than actually going out. Now, as for the actual cooling solutions, which are probably one of the more important things, case aside, they are what is going to possibly have more of a difference between different categories. There's different types of it. The most common one is air cooling, which is just a heat sink and a fan. There's AIO cooling, which is a sort of liquid cooling, which I'll get into in a second, and a custom or an open loop, which is the nice, pretty water cooling loops that you usually see on a bit higher end stuff. There's other types like liquid nitrogen cooling or LN2. There's chilled water, but that's not practical and it's not something anyone is going to use on a daily basis. That's more of a competition thing if you're into that. Now, air coolers. Yeah, air coolers, like I said, it's a chunk of metal touching your CPU, so a heatsink, and a fan or two blowing air through it. It's as simple as it gets. To start off, let's just be plain. The Intel stock cooler is absolute trash, and it is a waste of materials to even give it to anyone. That said, the K series doesn't even have one, so you are going to have to buy one anyway. You might as well buy a good one while you're at it. The AMD cooler that comes included with their CPUs is okay these days, especially the ones coming with the Zen 2 generation. But if you are looking to overclock, I would invest into something a little more beefy than that. Now, pros and cons of air cooling. Well, good air coolers can have great performance. A good example is the Be Quiet Darkrock Pro 4 that I have installed. I actually installed it on the video. I'll put some b-roll of it if I can find it. Yeah, Noctua is also a very good brand of that, and they are the cheapest option of the air cooling or AIO or water cooling. They are the cheapest option of the three. They're extremely simple, like I said, heatsink, fan, air moves through, that's it. And that means that there are not a lot of points of failure. The only thing that can possibly fail there in terms of the hardware failing is the fan, and that's very obvious when it's not working because, yeah, it's not spinning, and you'd see that it's not spinning. So if your CPU is getting hot and your fan is not spinning, you know what the problem is. And otherwise, it's almost install and forget. You have to clean dust if need be, and you have to replace the thermal paste, like I said, but that's it. It's ideal for the people that just wanted to get the job done, not have a whole lot of headaches with it, and the system works and is doing, well, good enough results if you're not doing high-end overclocking or anything like that. Now the cons. It usually performs worse than liquid cooling, and I know that there are outliers to it, like very good air coolers will beat the worst water coolers out there, especially IOs, but that does not happen in the majority of the cases, and like I said, they're outliers. Water transfers heat better than air does, at least faster, and yeah. The air coolers are usually a bit bulky and possibly heavy, and the bulky does matter because you have to really check if you have, for example, a big tower, like a big tower cooler like the Darkrock Pro I mentioned. you really have to check for compatibility, that it fits in your case, and that it actually does not conflict in terms of space with other parts like the RAM, like I found out on that video I mentioned when I was trying to install it. Thankfully, I managed to solve it, but it was kind of a scary experience. They are also heavy, so make sure that your motherboard is screwed well at the top. Don't skimp out on leaving the standoffs at the top not attached because you ran out of screws or something. Because your motherboard is going to be very top heavy if you have a big tower cooler there. Other than that, they look a little bit less appealing than their counterparts, and they can possibly be the more noisy of the options that I'm going to discuss. Air coolers mostly focus on CPU because, well, with GPUs you already get them pre-installed. What you get when you buy the graphics card, you have a stock cooler in there from whatever brand you got it, and you can't really change that, at least it's just not worth it. So yeah, when you do buy a graphics card, if you are interested in its cooling capacity, try to research beforehand because you're going to be stuck with it. As for I/O, I consider them the step in between the easygoing air cooling that doesn't require much maintenance and the full-on custom open water loop that is the staple of all PC enthusiasts basically. It's an enclosed water system. It comes sealed from the factory with coolant in there. It has a radiator that also acts as a coolant reservoir, and a pump that is usually, not always, but usually included on the CPU block. They are mostly applicable for the CPU. However, there are also some GPU options out there. Bracken from NZXT is an example of that. It's like a bracket that goes under GPU. You take the stock cooling off, obviously, and the bracket goes under the graphics card and makes contact, and it cools it like that with a radiator at the bottom. So it's kind of an AIO cooler for a GPU like that. Now, as for the pros of the AIO coolers, they perform better than most air coolers, like I said, apart from some outliers, and they are cheaper than a full-on loop, even though they're more expensive than an air cooler. So, like I said, a bit of an in-between thing. It's, again, a lot easier to install and to set up than a water cooling loop, but it's harder than a CPU air cooler because you have to deal with radiators, a lot more wires. Yeah, it's just a little bit more tricky. The water block that goes on the CPU is a lot smaller, a lot smaller than most air coolers, and it's usually lighter and more aesthetically pleasing as well. So there's that. If you want your system to look good, you really want to have either an AIO or a custom loop and not really an air cooler in there. Maintenance, again, is pretty easy. It's just replacing paste there. You don't even have to worry about dust because there's, at least not on the block, because there's no fan there, just a pump and it's, in the block. You do have to clean the fans and potentially the radiator, which, if the radiator gets dirty, can be a pain in the butt. They are difficult to clean, but if you have a decent case with some filtering, then it should be fine. Can handle most overclocking and decently heavy usage, and they usually are quiet because, well, normally when you have an IO, you don't have a 120mm, you have a bigger radiator with like two or three fans in there. So you have more fans moving out the same amount of heat as you would with an air cooler, which means they can spin slower and they'll produce less noise while still getting the job done. As for the cons, well, they are a bit more expensive, like I mentioned, than stock air coolers, and the performance, although better, is not massively better. It's just, a bit better, enough to justify the bump in price, but nothing mind-blowing, really. They have to have a case that supports it, which usually means a bit of a more expensive case, because the radiators have to fit there, and it has a lot more points of failure. The pump could fail, the tubes could leak, the fluid could slowly, over the time, evaporate through, the edges of the cables and such. That doesn't happen often, either of those things, but it can happen. Pump dying might be the biggest concern, and it's not immediately visible because you don't really see the pump moving. It's hidden under the block, usually under plastic or whatever, so it might not be very obvious why your CPU is dying at first. I mean, sometimes they may start making weird noises and then it's kind of obvious, but if it doesn't, you really have to keep an eye on it. I can't really personally vouch for that, but people seem to have an idea that AIO coolers usually last between 2 to 4 years or something like that, 4 years being generous. So yeah, you might be looking at a pump def before that time. Last but not the least, the custom, fully self-built open water cooling loop. This is pretty much the pinnacle of enthusiast PC cooling. It looks dope as hell, and it also doesn't come cheap. There are kits out there, or you can just buy parts from this and that and slap them together, but you have to keep in mind certain details like what kind of tubing do you want, soft or hard tubing, or glass, or nickel, or copper, or whatever. What kind of metal are you going to be using, all that sort of thing. All those considerations matter. There's water blocks, radiators, pumps, reservoirs, fans, what kind of runs, where are the tubes going to go and how are they going to flow. You have to think of things like when you do a certain angle, if your tube bends, then the water pressure is going to drop, and you have to plan that all meticulously, because if you screw something up, you're going to be facing either redoing it all again, which is not cheap, and, well, a lot of time wasted as well, and potentially leaks that might damage your hardware. In any case, what are the pros? Well, it's pretty much the best cooling that you're going to get outside of exotic cooling, like LM2 for example, and by quite a lot. You're going to notice a big difference in temperature. It's going to be a lot lower than you were doing. You're looking at load temperatures of, like, I don't know, 50 degrees at tops in most cases. So that is quite a big difference. They're available both for CPUs and GPUs, and parts are being more and more readily available. It's becoming more of a market, and you won't have to dig very deeply to actually find supplies for your water cooling needs. They can be made to look amazing. There's very great examples out there. I'm not really going to post them on the video now because copyright issues, you never know. But just do a Google image search for water cooling loop, and I'm sure you're gonna get your mind blown if you're into PC stuff. There are, like I mentioned, kits out there. One that comes to mind that I would love to try someday would be the Corsair Hydro X, maybe if I ever get sponsored by Corsair. And EK Waterblocks also has a few kits, although last I checked, a lot of them were unavailable, but there were some available ones. You just have to check for compatibility with your actual parts, and yeah, with your case as well, obviously. Corsair has a nice configuring program on their website to make sure everything is compatible before you actually buy anything, so that really does help. Now, as for the cons, well, pause the video for a second and head out to the Corsair page for Hydro X, or check out the AK water blocks. Go for Corsair, that's a funnier one. Now, pause the video after I finish this sentence and just Google what you would need for a water cooling loop for your PC, or for a PC that you'd like to build. Okay, do it now. Okay, did you get spooked yet? Yeah. It's not cheap, especially if you're starting the loop from scratch. You're gonna be spending a pretty penny on water cooling, and there are, like I mentioned, lots of mistakes that you could make. A lot could be catastrophic, a lot could naturally ruin everything else other than costing you a bit more money. Fittings alone could be in the hundreds in a water cooling loop if you really don't skimp out on those. It's not only about the money though, it's all the extra headaches and the extra maintenance that it involves, because it does require a lot of maintenance. You have to clean it a lot. You have to keep in mind that you have to add, for example, stuff to the coolant to actually stop algae from growing in the water. If you use colored fluids, you might have issues with deposits and gunk on the water blocks, and then you have to open it all up, clean it, flush it, you name it, and then put it all back up together. So makes it an enormous pain in the butt to replace any parts on your PC, because yeah, then you have to drain the loop, take all the water out, put it back in when you're done. Water blocks are individual to the parts that they use. Mostly GPU, if you have GPUs from different models or even different brands, even if they're the same GPU, like let's say 2080 Ti block from ASUS might be different from a 2080 Ti from VGA, for example, because of the differences in PCB size and other layouts. So if you change a part, you most likely have to either redo a part of the loop or flat out buy part of the loop again. Definitely not aimed at beginners, and if you don't have high-end hardware that actually gets hot, then it's a bit pointless, other than for the cool looking factor, I guess, which is a good point. I have to do an honorable mention to CPU deleting, and what this means is when you see a CPU, that metal, that's not the actual CPU, that's a cover, that's a heat spreader that helps the heat spread from the CPU. The actual CPU die is in there with some thermal paste on top, usually, and that cover then. And deleting means taking out that heat spreader, cleaning out the thermal paste, which is usually quite bad. And this is mostly done on Intel CPUs, mind you, not so much on Ryzen. Cleaning out that thermal paste and replacing it with better one, or even liquid metal, for example, putting the heat spreader back on, and you can drop your temperatures like crazy in the orders of 20 degrees or more. Can be risky, and it most definitely voids your warranty if you try to do that, so I would not recommend it unless you really want, if you really can afford a new CPU. So what are my recommendations if you are looking to improve your cooling solution? Step 1, make sure you have a decent case that is not completely ruining everything by blocking all the airflow. If you already have one, make sure your cables are in place and that your fan inlets and filters and stuff are clean and actually letting air through once again. Now, before you actually go buying stuff, do that. And then those are my recommendations for what you should go. If you just play some stuff once in a while, you're not really big into the tech stuff, and you don't really care a lot how your PC looks, like, you know, no glass panels, no pretty lights, no nothing. Stick to an air cooler. It'll do the job. It'll do the job in 99% of the cases. So, and it's also the cheaper option. So you can take that money, apply it to buying a better part next time. It's that simple. If you do care how your PC looks and want a little bit extra cooling because of reasons like, for example, less noise because there's more fans on an IO than on a heatsink, if you just like the way it looks better, I would recommend you to get an IO unless you have a ton of money to spend and you actually are willing to invest the time and energy needed into actually maintaining a water cooling loop. Because it's not just building it and buying it, it's actually maintaining it. That is sometimes the biggest issue. If you really are into PC tech and you like a boutique look PC that also runs fast as hell, water cooling is the way to go. And yeah, but if you are that kind of person, you probably don't need to hear that advice from me. I personally have not done a full water cooling loop yet. Hope I will in the future when the channel grows a bit more. Hope I can do a series of doing that for the first time, so you beginners can also, you know, learn with me and with my possible mistakes. I will probably need to grow the channel a bit more, so hit the subscribe button if you would like to see a series like that. Would really appreciate it. In the meantime, I hope this video has been helpful to you and it will help you survive this summer while gaming and doing your usual stuff comfortably in these weird times that we all are sitting inside more than usual. So this has been Ethic PC Guy. I hope I'll see you in the next video. Drop a like in the comment, tell me what your preferences are in terms of cooling, and I hope I will see you soon.